How to lose weight without tracking your calories. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about here today because, let's be honest, tracking calories is not the most fun thing in the world, and it's also not necessary, and it's not for everybody. Now, I want to start this video by saying that I'm not against tracking calories at all. I think it's actually a very beneficial thing to do, and I think it's a very great learning tool, and I'm a big proponent of it, and I think it has a lot of benefits, right? So tracking calories can be a really useful learning tool to learn about things like the different caloric values of different foods, because calories matter at the end of the day. It helps you learn about what's too much food, what's too little food, how to make substitutions to your meals to make them more calorically friendly. So I think tracking calories is a really useful tool to learn about nutrition. And if you've never tracked your calories, I do encourage you to do so. In addition to that, if you are tracking calories, it allows for more flexibility with your diet as well. Because if you know exactly how many calories you're eating, then you have a little bit more wiggle room to include things like ice cream, for example, right? Because again, you know exactly how many calories you're consuming. And truth be told, that some people just really enjoy tracking calories. So if that's you, the tips that I'm going to share here in this video are going to be really helpful. And I do still encourage you to develop all of these behaviors that I'm going to be talking about it. But the truth is that you do not need to track calories in order to lose weight. Okay? It's very possible to lose weight and lose substantial weight and get pretty damn lean without tracking calories if you implement some of the tips that I'm going to be sharing with you here today in this episode. Now, in addition to that, I want you to understand that while it is possible to lose weight without tracking calories, it becomes exponentially more difficult the leaner you become, right? So when I'm talking about losing weight here without tracking calories, I'm not talking about being stage ready for a bodybuilding show where you're super ripped, you have veins popping everywhere. Because the truth is that the leaner you get, the hungrier you're going to be, the less you have to eat. And in those cases, being very meticulous about your caloric intake is very helpful. And not only very helpful, almost necessary. Okay. What I do want to share with you are specific tips and things that I do personally to help me regulate hunger and satiety, to provide structure to my overall nutrition and lifestyle, in order to lose weight easily without having to track calories. Let's go ahead and get into it. First thing I want to talk about is the fact that tracking calories, or I should say, losing weight without tracking calories is possible, but you do have to be a little bit more strict with certain things, and you do have to be a little bit more disciplined, for lack of a better term, and you do have to track certain variables, because at the end of the day, we don't know if we're making progress if we're not tracking anything, right? So I want to start with that because I don't want you to think that just because you don't track your calories, you don't have to track anything, you don't have to focus on anything, because at the end of the day, we have to track things in order to make sure that we're making progress. Now, I'm going to share with you guys the specific things that I do when I lose weight without tracking calories, and specific tips around nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle that you can implement into your day-to-day life to make weight loss easier without tracking calories. Okay? And these are the things that I do personally, like I mentioned. And every time I attempt to lose weight or get a little bit leaner, I don't track calories. I did spend years tracking calories, but I haven't tracked anything in a really long time. And it's because I've developed certain behaviors that allow me to lose weight easily and maintain a healthy and lean physique without having to track calories. So let's talk about nutrition first, okay? And these variables that I'm going to be sharing with you are in no specific order, but they all contribute, again, to helping you have a healthy overall diet that is conducive towards having a lean physique. And I say lean physique, and I'm not talking about being ripped here and being like stage ready for a bodybuilding show or anything like that, because again, the leaner you are, the more difficult it is to get leaner without tracking calories, because you're going to feel hungrier, you have to eat less, and just tracking calories is really helpful and objective. But if you have some extra body fat and you just want to look lean, maybe have some definition in your ab and look healthy and look great and feel comfortable without your shirt, these are some of the things that I want you to focus on. Okay, so the first thing we want to do when it comes to nutrition is finding regularity with your eating schedule. Come up with a schedule that fits your lifestyle. It doesn't matter if you want to eat 3 times per day, 4 times per day, or 5 times per day. It literally doesn't matter. Just find a schedule that works for you and stick to it. For me, that's 3 meals per day plus a snack, okay? And my typical day of eating looks something like this. I have breakfast around 7 or 7:30 in the morning. I usually head to the gym about 8:30 in the morning. I train till about 10 or 10:30. And then I have a snack. That snack is typically 2 scoops of protein powder and a piece of fruit. And then I have lunch around 1 or 1:30 p.m. And then I have dinner around 6:30 or 7 p.m. And I stick to that to the best of my ability, right? And sometimes I have a small snack right before bed because I'm not a robot. And sometimes I'm a little bit hungry and I'll have something like a small handful of pistachios. But having a regular meal schedule is extremely helpful when you're trying to lose weight without tracking calories for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, when you're losing weight, you're going to feel a little bit hungry, right? And if you simply eat whenever you're hungry, it's going to be a lot more difficult to actually lose weight. Whereas if you have a regular schedule, even if you feel a little bit hungry, you tell yourself, no, I'm going to eat at whatever time, right? Let's say you have lunch at 1 p.m., then you have dinner at 6 p.m. Let's say it's 4 p.m. and you're feeling a little bit hungry. Well, if you have a regular meal schedule, you know that you're still about 2 hours away from dinner. And I think it makes it mentally easier to deal with a little bit of hunger, right? So having a regular meal schedule is really helpful because of that. The second aspect of it is that having a regular meal schedule actually helps regulate your hunger and your satiety. When it comes to nutrition and trying to lose weight without tracking calories, the main thing that we're trying to do is have a diet that helps you regulate your hunger, right? Because if you're not hungry, or if you can minimize your hunger, it's easier to eat less calories and lose weight. So all of the things that we're going to be talking about here are essentially around regulating hunger. And having a regular meal schedule has been shown in the scientific literature to help regulate hunger-related hormones, things like ghrelin, things like leptin, right? And it's, again, just easier to not feel hungry when you have a regular meal schedule. Whereas if your eating is all over the place and you don't follow a particular schedule, you're going to feel hunger pangs at different times of the day. And if you're not ready and you don't have your food prepared, it's going to be a lot more difficult to stick to your diet and lose weight without tracking calories. The next thing to focus on is to eat more what are called high satiety foods. Okay. And satiety simply means the feeling of being full, right? And we want to eat more foods that help us feel full. Again, because if we're fuller, we're not going to be craving stuff and we're not going to be wanting snacks. And it's a lot easier to reduce your caloric intake. So one thing I want to introduce is something called the satiety index, which you can see here on the screen. And if you're listening to the podcast on like Apple Podcasts or something like that, you can't see it, but the satiety index is essentially a scale that rates foods based on how satiating they are on a per calorie basis, right? So take one food, compare it to another food, 100 calories of this food versus 100 calories of the other food. What makes you feel fuller? That's what the satiety index is. And if you're listening, you can just Google satiety index of common foods, and you'll see a ton of images pop up on Google, okay? And essentially, we want to consume foods that have a higher satiety score because, again, on a per calorie basis, they're going to help us feel fuller, which as a result will make it easier for you to reduce your caloric intake. So foods that are really high on the satiety index include whole foods, minimally processed foods, foods that are high in protein and fiber, things like oranges, fish, right? I'm just talking about the particular satiety index that I'm looking at here. But foods like oranges, fish, beef, apples, beans, potatoes, these foods are way more satiating than foods that have a lower satiety index. Things like chips, cookies, donuts, right? And I think it's pretty common sense. But this is why, again, focusing on your food choices is really important outside of just tracking calories. Because the foods that we eat influence the way that we feel. And we know that the hardest thing when it comes to sticking to a caloric deficit is regulating hunger, regulating cravings. Because if it wasn't difficult, then everybody would lose weight and keep it off. And we know that that's not the case, right? Most people that lose weight actually regain it. And it's because they don't focus on food choices that help regulate hunger. So the first thing to do is to consume more foods that have a higher satiety score. That's going to make it easier to reduce calories overall. Next is to focus on foods that have low caloric density. This kind of goes hand in hand with the satiety index stuff. The foods that have low caloric density simply are foods that have a lot of volume, so you get a lot of food for low calories. Okay, and again, this essentially helps with regulating hunger and satiety as well. And the foods that have the lowest caloric density are going to be things like fruits, veggies, but also soups in general, because you're getting a ton of water as well, which can help with satiety regulation as well. Salads, right? Consuming foods that have low caloric density. And one of the easiest things to do here as well is thinking about substitutions of foods that you already eat to reduce the caloric density of your meals. For example, When I'm not trying to lose weight, I will typically buy I'll easily eat more like chicken thighs or 80/20 ground beef, right? Meats that have a little bit more fat. And when I'm trying to lose weight, I will substitute those. So the chicken thighs, I might still get chicken thighs, but I'll get them skinless, right? Or instead of chicken thighs, I'll get chicken breast. Same when it comes to beef. Instead of getting 80/20 ground beef, I'll get like 90/10 or 93/7 or 97/3, which is not tasty. Actually, I don't buy that at all, but I know a lot of people do, and that's just extremely lean. Or you might substitute the ground beef for ground turkey, right? And so you're still eating the same amount of food, but with less calories. So you're reducing the caloric density. Another thing you can do is use less fat when you're cooking foods, right? So I eat a lot of rice, and I usually cook my rice and then add a little bit of olive oil. And if I'm trying to lose fat, I just simply don't add the oil because I don't want the added calories. And it really doesn't make a big difference in terms of how full the meal makes me because I still have a big plate of food, but now each plate has probably like 100 or 200 less calories simply because I didn't add the oil. And I'm still getting fat from the meat that I'm consuming, right? So there are these small little substitutions that you can make to reduce the caloric density of your meals pretty easily. Now, so far we've been talking about foods that help you feel full. It's also important to think about macronutrients that help you feel full. And this stuff is pretty simple. Focus on eating more protein and more fiber, okay? Lean protein and fiber. There's plenty of scientific research showing that these two nutrients specifically are very satiating. They help reduce ghrelin levels, help increase leptin levels. Again, these are just hormones associated with hunger and satiety regulation. But eating more protein and fiber is going to be incredibly beneficial. And protein and fiber actually both have a very, what's called a very high thermic effect of food. And the thermic effect of food simply means how many calories you burn digesting and metabolizing that nutrient. So not only does it help you feel fuller, you actually burn slightly more calories metabolizing those nutrients. So it's beneficial to load up on protein and fiber, right? Protein, we're talking about lean protein here. So we're talking about lean ground beef, chicken breast, white fish, lean pork, pork tenderloin, right? Load up on these high protein foods. Doesn't just have to be meat, Greek yogurt, low fat cheese. These foods are going to be really high in protein. It's going to help you regulate your hunger as well and make it easier to stick to lower calories. And then fiber as well, right? Most people already know about protein. A lot of people don't focus on fiber whatsoever. And when it comes to fiber, very similar to protein, just helps you feel really full on lower calories.
Hey guys, some of you may not know that I'm the scientific advisor for a supplement company called Outwork Nutrition. I help with the formulation of new products to help ensure that they're effective and backed by science. Unlike many other supplement companies out there, we don't rely on exaggerated claims or flashy marketing tactics. Instead, we let the science speak for itself. We take pride in formulating products that deliver real results, helping you achieve your fitness goals in a meaningful way. If you're in the market for supplements like protein powder, pre-workout, or recovery products, make sure to check us out at outworknutrition.com. And as a thank you for being an avid listener of this podcast, use code Joey for an exclusive discount at checkout. You can find the link to our website down in the description of this podcast episode. Remember, our goal is to empower you with science-backed supplements that truly make a difference. Choose Outwork Nutrition and elevate your fitness to new heights.
So high fiber foods include things like berries, right? Raspberries are incredibly high in fiber. Whole grains are great sources of fiber. Actually, if you guys go to the description of this video and sign up for our free Facebook group, we have a ton of resources on there. I have a free high fiber cheat sheet there that will essentially give you a list of a ton of foods that are really high in fiber to include in your diet. In general, beans are another great addition, right? Black beans, chickpeas, lentils, doesn't matter. They're all going to be relatively high in fiber. Now, aside from that, it's also important that you enjoy your diet, right? So when it comes to losing weight, one of the things that we don't want to do is cut out all the foods that we enjoy. Because if you do that, your life is essentially miserable, right? So when I'm trying to lose weight without tracking calories, one of the things that I do is I try to keep snacks at home that I really enjoy that are macro or calorie friendly, right? So for example, I really like ice cream, but I'm not going to be having full fat ice cream when I'm trying to lose weight or I'm not going to have it super frequently because it's very calorically dense. So what do? I buy calorie friendly ice cream. So I buy things like Yasso bars, Yasso bars, Yasso. They're like some Greek yogurt frozen bars. that are absolutely delicious. If you guys try them, the pistachio and the mint chocolate chip are my absolute favorite. But these Yazo bars are delicious, and they only have 100 calories per bar. So finding substitutions like this of foods that you enjoy that are low in terms of calories is a really easy way to make fat loss feel easy and sustainable, because you still get to enjoy the things that you like, but you find alternatives that are lower in calories. That's really all it is, right? And going hand in hand with this, it's also really important to modify your environment, right? So when I said having low calorie alternatives of specific foods, that's essentially modifying my environment, right? Because I'm having foods available at home. Home is your environment, your at-home food environment. I have foods available at home that I enjoy, but that meet my current goals of losing weight, aka low-calorie foods, right? And when it comes to modifying your environment, I think the easiest thing to do is to keep things that are temptation out of the house, right? So for example, I don't keep a pint of ice cream in my freezer, because if I do, I'm going to eat it. I don't keep a dozen chocolate chip cookies in my pantry, because if I do, I'm going to eat them, right? So generally, it's very helpful to keep foods that are tempting, that are easy to snack on, to keep them out of the house. I don't tell myself I can't have those foods. Truthfully, if I want a cookie, I will just have a cookie. I'm just not going to buy a large amount of those foods and keep them at my house, because I don't need to do that, right? And it's a lot easier to have good willpower when you don't need to exert your willpower, right? So that just means if you don't have the foods at home, you're not going to eat them. It's as simple as that, right? And if I go out and I'm with some friends and they're having ice cream and I want some ice cream, I'll just indulge. I just don't need to keep it at home, because the thing is, I'm just going to eat it when I'm bored, right? So late nights, I go to my kitchen, I'm going to grab a cookie, I'm going to grab some ice cream. Whereas if I don't have those things, I might just grab some like Greek yogurt and some fruit, which is more in line with my goals, because those foods are high protein, high fiber. They help me regulate my hunger. They're low in terms of calories, so they help me lose weight easily without tracking calories. So those are some of the main nutrition-related variables that I would highly, highly encourage you to focus on. Okay, to recap that: low-calorie dense foods, focus on satiety index. That's just mainly going to be minimally processed foods, lean proteins, fruits, veggies, etc. Make sure you're loading up on protein and fiber as well. Modify your food environment. Have alternatives of high-calorie foods that you like, or just foods that you enjoy. Have low-calorie alternatives so that you can still enjoy those things in moderation, right? Now, aside from nutrition, it's also important to focus on exercise. I think this is incredibly obvious, but I want to emphasize that the purpose of exercise is not to lose weight. The purpose of exercise is to improve your health and improve your body composition. We want to build muscle with exercise and all of that great stuff. But regardless, it's important to exercise, right? We need to be physically active, because if we're not physically active, then our caloric expenditure is going to be extremely low, and it's going to be harder to lose weight, especially without tracking calories. In addition to that, regular exercise itself also has a positive effect on hunger regulation. I know I've lightly mentioned throughout this episode things like ghrelin and leptin. Again, those are just hormones that influence the regulation of hunger, but there's really good science showing that exercise helps regulate those things as well. When it comes to exercise, this is what I recommend. Work out as much as you can, given your lifestyle and your schedule, right? I think aiming for about 4 workouts that are around an hour each and that are pretty intense is a really good target for the week. If you can't do 4 and you do 3, that's fine. But if you can aim for 4, that's fantastic. Now, outside of intense exercise, have a daily step goal. I can't tell you how helpful this is. Have a daily step goal and keep yourself accountable, okay? So when I'm not trying to lose weight, realistically, I probably get between 6,000 and 7,000 steps most days. When I am trying to lose weight, I set a target of 10,000 steps. So that's about a 50% increase. And when I stick to those 10,000 steps, I stick to my regular meal schedule, and I follow the nutrition behaviors that I shared with you, I lose weight pretty easily, right? Now, adhering to these things can be a little bit difficult, but if you can execute on these things, weight loss is going to be pretty easy. And 10,000 is not a magical number. It's just a number that works for me in general. The more you can walk, the better, right? And the reason why having a step goal is helpful is because it helps keep you accountable and you stay physically active outside the gym, aka you burn more calories, right? And for me, I simply just go on a 30-minute walk first thing in the morning. I'll wake up a little bit earlier than usual. I'll go for a walk with my family, with my wife, with my son. And then I'll usually go for about another 30-minute walk at the end of the day. And then those 2 walks plus all the movement that I do throughout the day usually gets me to the 10,000 steps pretty easily. But have a step goal so you stay physically active outside of the gym. Okay. Now, in addition to all this, it's also important to think about other factors outside of nutrition and exercise that are important. Okay. And these 2 are mainly going to be around sleep and stress management. And I'm not a sleep expert and I'm not a stress management expert, but I am a scientist who understands that poor sleep and high stress levels can negatively impact things like energy expenditure, hunger regulation, caloric intake, right? Specifically when it comes to sleep, there's really good science showing that individuals who are sleep restricted, who get less than about 6 hours of sleep on average per night, have higher hunger. Okay, so their hunger hormones are elevated. Even when they eat the same number of calories, they feel hungrier. They have higher cravings for calorically dense foods. And they have lower energy expenditure, so they burn less calories. Those 3 are a recipe for weight gain, right? So if you're not prioritizing your sleep, it might be way more difficult to focus on some of these other behaviors simply because you're going to feel hungrier. You're not going to be burning as many calories, probably because you're tired and you're not moving as much. You're going to be craving more calorically dense foods. And so if you're not sleeping well, really focusing on your sleep is probably one of the best things that you can do to help you lose weight, specifically without tracking calories, right? And even if you are tracking calories, it doesn't matter. Sleep is incredibly important for all of that. And maybe I could just share with you here some tips that might help with your sleep hygiene if you do struggle with sleeping enough or falling asleep at night. So in general, if you stare at a screen before bed, if you're watching things that elevate your heart rate, like action movies, or maybe you're playing intense video games or anything like that, it's going to be really hard to fall asleep. I highly recommend limiting those things an hour or 2 before bed. And if you're watching some TV, watch something easy and lighthearted, right? Maybe like a comedy show or something like that, or something you can just put in the background that you don't have to pay much attention to, because it's going to help your body relax. Second to that is do an activity that helps you, again, relax and be sleepy, like maybe reading a book, right? If I read a book before bed, I pretty much fall asleep. But do something that's relaxing. Maybe take a hot bath, maybe do some stretching, some yoga, read a book before bed, something that's not staring at a screen. It's going to help a ton to put your body in the right state to go to sleep, essentially. And when it comes to going to sleep, make sure you have the optimal conditions as well. We want to have low temperature, so you want it to be nice and cold in your room, ideally below 70 degrees, because our body's core temperature actually has to drop before it can fall asleep. So modifying the room temperature can help with that. Make sure it's extremely dark, right? Don't have light coming in through your windows. Don't have your phone on. Don't have your TV on, because light also impacts sleep or your ability to fall asleep. And then additionally, like if you're a sensitive sleeper and you have a partner and they snore perhaps, use earplugs, right? I'm a pretty sensitive sleeper. When my wife was pregnant with our son, she was snoring a ton during her pregnancy and I could not sleep. And then I purchased some earplugs and thankfully I got some sleep again, right? So try to implement things that help your particular situation. Some people are more sensitive than others. If you are sensitive, things like earplugs, things like an eye mask can be incredibly helpful as well. All right, guys, that's going to summarize this whole episode. In general, losing weight without calories is definitely possible. I'm not anti-tracking calories at all. I think it can be really, really helpful, but I do acknowledge that it's not for everybody. If you implement some of these tips and they start working for you, let me know down in the comments how it's going. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to shoot them my way as well, and I'll make sure to address those. As always, if you enjoy the show, if you're a regular listener or a regular watcher, if you're watching on YouTube, like the video and leave a comment. It helps me a ton. And if you're listening to the podcast, I would really appreciate if you took a second to rate the podcast on any podcasting app and leave a review if you enjoy the show and you're a regular listener. It truly, truly does help me a ton. With that being said, I'll catch you guys in next week's episode.